Vigilante movies are a staple movie genre, sometimes as a statement, but most often as entertainment for people. Normally I'd only review one movie per video, but these two movies both deal with lone vigilantes in an urban setting. One is the Canadian film Defendor, the other is the British film Harry Brown. I would also include the American films Watchmen and The Boondock Saints into the mix, but I've already covered those films in previous reviews. So we have on one end Harry Brown. The man who the title is named for is a lonely old widower living in an urban English setting. He's a former Marine who was stationed in Ireland at the boiling point of the IRA riots. Those riots have become the subject for half of Jim Sheridan's filmography, but we see none of that action in this film. The movie focuses instead on the street crime in England, developed by the drug and weapon trading going on between gangs and other criminals. We get signs of it everywhere. One scene that really surprised me with its realism was the homemade video that starts the film. Two guys are on drugs and zooming around on a motorcycle when one of them starts shooting his gun for the hell of it. He hits a mother in the head as she's walking with her baby carriage. The two then flee, only to be hit and killed by a truck. And all of this is caught on a shaky video camera that one of the guys is holding. That opening was a really effective way to get us into this film. Harry Brown is subjected to these attacks and this behavior by simply looking out of his window and seeing the violent youths openly dealing in criminal activities. He's content to keep his head down, though, and mind his own business. Just like Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven, he's been pushed to violence in the past, but he tries not to partake in violence anymore in memory of his late wife. His friend Leonard confides in him about his growing fear at the harassment he's subjected to by the youths. If you've seen the trailer, you know how that turns out. Let's just say that Harry Brown goes the way of Charles Bronson and decides the best way to deal with these punks is from the end of a gun. Certainly he's capable despite being in his autumn years. The wonderful thing about Michael Caine is that he's as able to play a kindly old father figure as he's able to play a steely-eyed, imposing man. I believed this character completely, and it helped me believe the world he lived in. I've gone on to IMDb and viewed the feverish debates on how realistic the film is, and I've come to the conclusion that nobody really knows, and that it's in the eye of the beholder. I personally thought the movie got a bit over the top. But isn't that the point of vigilante movies? They take the realism of street violence, things that occur over the course of months, and condense them into a feature-length film for the vigilante to wreak havoc on. The film was expertly made, capitalizing on the common violence of street crime, and I'm sure in some urban areas it really is that bad. Despite some philosophizing on whether vigilantism is right or wrong, this is ultimately a film meant to entertain us and let us sit back and forget about whether it's good or not to watch this guy shoot young, violent thugs. Overall, the movie did a very good job casting Michael Caine in this role. Emily Mortimer, as the sympathetic cop, was performed so that we really see the effects of how individual police officers personally deal with this crime that they're exposed to all the time. The stress is pretty clear to make out on her face, because unlike her superiors, she hasn't gotten jaded or detached from the society she lives in. The street thugs are realistically played, and while the plot is clearly fictionalized for dramatic purposes, the realism is still reasonably maintained for the most part. Overall, pretty worthy film. So now for Defendor. The main character in Defendor is a mentally ill man who lives alone in a city in Canada. The movie was filmed in Toronto and Hamilton, both of which could very easily be the movie's plot location. The man is named Arthur Poppington. By day he holds up a simple construction job and is checked up on by one of his co-workers. But by night, he's Defendor, the vigilante who's out on the hunt for Captain Industry. Defendor doesn't use guns in his quest to clean up the city, but he's extremely innovative in his tactics, such as using wasps, marbles, and a trench club that his grandfather used in World War I. Sound funny? The movie trailer makes it look like a flat-out comedy. It's not. At least not as much as you'd think. Just like Harry Brown, the movie is very realistic in portraying the urban city and the people you'd run into if you took a few wrong turns. We get the usual immigrant crime lords. We get the dirty cop played by that wonderful Canadian actor Elias Koteas, a street hooker played by Kat Dennings, and of course, Arthur Poppington played by Woody Harrelson. It's amusing to think of the range that Harrelson has played in his life. I mean, it seems like yesterday I was complimenting his performance as Mickey Knox. This time, he's a simple-minded man who tragically gained his mental limitations due to his mother being a drug addict and a prostitute. After her death at an early age, he's raised by his grandfather, who gives an explanation for her disappearance that affects Arthur for the rest of his life. The movie gets a lot of dark comedy in by showing his unique ways of fighting crime and how they would realistically play out. This helps us really sympathize with him, and Woody Harrelson's tremendous talent is no downside either. The story includes Defendor's run-ins with the police, who see him as an incredible nuisance to their operations. We see him befriending the young prostitute, who is out of a place to stay, and we see him gain the sympathy of a psychologist played by Canadian actress Sandra Oh. The film had me entertained and also very interested and invested in the story. Woody Harrelson, of course, completely pulls off this role. Kat Dennings does a great job of actually looking like she's not had sufficient living conditions for a while. And of course, Elias Koteas is perfectly capable of playing a sardonic jerk. Now, since I've already put the two together in one video, I probably should say which one I prefer more. And while it's true that Harry Brown is a decent film, I gotta say I found Defendor the superior film. It's a perfect blend of realist drama and dark comedy, it boasts a menagerie of excellent acting, and it's overall a fine example of cinema to come from Canada. I recommend this wholeheartedly, especially for anyone who wants to see Woody Harrelson interrogate someone by squirting lime juice in their face as a form of torture. All these films that I've mentioned could be said to have been indirectly influenced by the classic vigilante film Death Wish, a controversial film in the 70s that made Charles Bronson a movie star. He played a man who provides a simple answer to rampant crime. Kill the evildoers yourself. The same questions and issues that plague the ideas behind Death Wish surround the movies I mentioned. In fact, The Boondock Saints ends with a series of random people asked on the street what they think of vigilantism. And they're all divided on whether it's right or not. I personally think it's very tempting to just throw your fist in the air and decide to solve the problem in those simple terms. As to whether it's the right solution, I'm still not entirely sure, but the question makes for great films.
I'm alive, my heart keeps beating like a hammer. Hard to be soft, tough to be tender. Come take my pulse, the pace.